Hi everyone. I wanted to answer a few of the questions that didn't get answered in class in regards to panopticon, commodity fetishism, and dramaturgy. Oh, and the theoretical perspective. So I had a bunch of people asking what is the differences and the similarities between the three dominant theoretical perspectives. So we went over today in class the different ways in which each theorist would analyze the condition of policing in Camden. And hopefully through that discussion you were able to see that all three are useful for explaining or analyzing a social phenomenon. So they're similar in that they're all used to explain behavior. The functionalism and conflict perspective theory are similar in that they examine things at a macro scale. So they're looking at large groups and social institutions and the relationship between those things. Whereas symbolic interactionism is looking at individuals and the interactions between them. So symbolic interactionism is understanding social phenomenon as shaping reality. So our interaction and our behaviors and all the things that happen are culminating in our reality. That reality doesn't exist independent of us, that we're constantly recreating it. So they look at relationships and interactions to understand what do people believe, how do they come to believe that, and how does that shape their interactions. So relying on symbols. For instance, in class I gave the example of the American flag. We interact with that piece of material when it's red, white, and blue with stripes and stars differently than we do the shirt. We have laws, in fact, of how we can interact with it or what we can do with it. And that's because it represents something more than just a piece of material. And it's shaping our interactions in the same way that, like, when we approach someone and we know that it's a man or we know that it's a woman, our interactions are shaped by that. Whether or not we think they are, we may believe that we treat everyone the same. However, subconsciously, those signifiers of wearing a man's shirt or a woman's shirt will lead to us acting one way or differently than if they had some other kind of symbolism. So symbolic interactionism is focusing on individuals. The two macro level perspectives, conflict theory and functionalism, focus on, we'll start with conflict theory, focuses on conflict between groups based on access to resources. So the argument is that there's limited finite resources and that people are in competition for those resources. The people who have the resources want to maintain them, and the people who don't have the resources seek them through whatever means necessary. So those conflicts of interest over resources is what's driving behavior. Functionalism argues that behaviors and the existence of social phenomena is a product of equilibrium, or individuals and structures working towards equilibrium. So the smooth functioning of society is the end goal, and everything is working toward that. So the example of crime today, talking about Camden, New Jersey, the reason for high crime is a failing in other parts of the system. So every part of the system is dependent on the other, and it adjusts when necessary to account for dysfunctions or shortcomings in other areas of the social world. So 3 different understandings of how the world works, but they're similar all in that they're useful for analyzing and understanding social behavior. One last note, someone asked what is false consciousness, and that's related to theoretical perspective of conflict theory. Conflict theory posits that conflict is driving behavior and that the people with the resources are maintaining the resources. And one of the ways that they do that is by creating or dominating the structure in a way that is continuously to their benefit. Through developing false consciousness in people who don't have the resources. False consciousness being the state of belief in which you think that the system is working for you. So this would be a poor person believing that the system that impoverishes them is to their benefit. So for instance, when you hear discussions of poor people that are the problem with why middle class people are suffering. So we are focusing our attention as middle class people on poor people as the problem. And we think that if it weren't for poor people, the way the system is designed, it would be working for us, which distracts our attention by paying attention to poor people as the problem, distracts our attention from the system that's actually causing our economic deprivation. So this would be what a conflict theorist would say, that like when the middle class people and the poor people believe that the system is fair and designed with their interest in mind, but like maybe for middle class people, poor people are disrupting their opportunity, that's a form of false consciousness, because they would argue that like you don't have the resources and the resources aren't going to be made available to you because the people at the top want to maintain their resources. So that is conflict theory and false consciousness.